Hi, everyone. This is Julie LaRocque with the South Florida Water Management District. I think we may have everybody, or most everybody, dialed into today's Technical Oversight Committee. So I have a number of announcements to go through, and hopefully if there's a few more folks planning to join us, they will arrive as we go through that. So anyway, thanks for joining us. Reminder, we're only holding this meeting online. Obviously, you're here on Zoom. If a few of you could please speak up, I would appreciate it. We have the special master with us, Mr. Barquette.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, thank you. And if the TOC reps could each introduce themselves also, besides me.
Good morning, this is Lori Miller.
Hey, Lori.
Yes.
I think I heard Donato. And Ed, do you want to say hello to everybody, please?
Yeah, good morning, Julie. This is Ed Smith, DEP. I'm the substitute TOC rep for this week, or this meeting.
Okay, great. Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
And Dan, could you also just introduce yourself since you were the other rep on the phone? That would be great.
Good morning, Julie. This is Dan Crawford, TOC rep for the Corps of Engineers.
Great. Thank you so much. We have a cast of thousands from the various agencies on the phone. I think I will bypass all those introductions that we might normally try to do if we're sitting in the auditorium to kind of reduce confusion. But we do have others available to speak up, including DEP, and there are also attendees on the other end, also from the Corps and from the park. Just kind of looking here, we have several attorney-type folks here listening in, and our ever-present Susan, who is our transcriptionist. So I'll just kind of leave it like that for you guys. If I could remind everybody, please mute your phone if you're not speaking, and try to listen from only one source. You have a couple of choices. If you have a mute button on your phone, that's great. You can mute your microphone on your computer. If you want to use the Zoom features, you can press *9 to raise your hand. I think there's a way you can click something to raise your hand also. Yeah, there is. I see it at the bottom of my own screen. And you can unmute your microphone. If you're using a telephone, you can unmute by pressing *6. I'll do my best to get public comment before we vote on anything, and I think we've got a couple of things to vote on, at least one today. We will take comments at the end of the meeting from folks, and many of you are on the line as attendees, and so you'll have an opportunity to comment before we end today. Obviously, we're not going to be able to get any written public comment, and I do want to mention the chat feature. We don't have a way to record or keep up with the chat feature, so if the chat is the only way you can ask a question, I'll read it into the record, but otherwise, we'd like you to do the raising of your hand and all that to make comments. If you have technical difficulties, do use the chat feature, please, okay? That would be very helpful. Normally, depending on the comment, we're not always able to respond to your comments, but your comments are really important, you guys, so we do want to hear them. For the reps, we'll try to kind of remember action items for the next meeting, and we'll also try to get reminders out to everybody. I have this great opportunity with a computer sitting in front of me to actually look at the screen and tell you what's on the web page. So we have a number of items on the TOC web page. We try to make it still easy for you all to get to the web page. So it's www.sfwmd.gov/TOC. So you can still get here by going to the main web page and putting in the TOC. There are some instructions on the main page, and then we have The compliance tables that we've been typically posting in recent years, so you've got that for the refuge. Provisional Shark River Slough for the current federal water year, as well as Taylor Slough and Coastal Basin, so those tracking reports are there. There's also the final Shark River Slough tracking report for federal water year 20, which John will be speaking to later in the meeting. On top of all that, we have for the fourth quarter of the calendar year, so that gets you through December, we've got the settlement agreement report, the QA report, as well as the data file associated with that. And then we have revised the third quarter report to finalize the data. And so that is also posted out there. The presentations that you are about to hear are posted under the Read Ahead link. So if you click on Read Ahead, you'll see the agenda and also 3 presentations and the meeting notes from the last meeting. So those are all out there. And we'll look forward to having that discussion. And of course, I have to go to a different screen to find the agenda, which I have now clicked past. So let me go back to that. All right. Now that we've gotten through all that, do we have any modifications to the agenda? And I think we may have a couple.
Yes, Julie, this is Donato. I would like to request an addition to the agenda. I think it should be really brief. Given the advancements that we made in the SB 33 working group, to include developing specific recommendations and delivering those to the principals and having received direction from the principals, I think it is prudent for Stuart, who's been coordinating the small working group, to provide a brief update on the status of this effort. If that could be forwarded to the agenda, that would be appreciated.
Okay, Stuart, I think you're on the line. If that's okay with you, I can call on you. Maybe we'll add that as the last agenda item, if that's okay. So that would be agenda item number 5. And if Stuart disappears, you might have to do it, Donato. Everybody okay with adding the working group update at the end of the agenda here today?
Yeah,
This is John Barquet. Yes, I actually was surprised that it wasn't on here.
Okay. And I assume the other reps are okay with that if I don't hear anybody screaming, because nobody's unmuting themselves right now. John, I think you also wanted to switch a couple of items, which made sense to me. We'd like to present the annual water year 2020 Shark River Slough results and then the fourth quarter settlement agreement report, so that we don't have to repeat as much information for folks, if that's okay with everybody.
This is Ed Smith. That's fine with me.
That works.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Donato, it works. It works for Donato as well.
All right. Yeah, it's a little hard to look around the room and see you guys nodding your heads. I will confess. All right. Thank you very much. So we got those 2 minor changes to the agenda, and next we roll into approving the meeting summary. And again, that's posted on the web page. Do we have any comments on the meeting summary?
Hey, this is Donato, and it's not really a comment. It is a question. There was one thing that happened in the notes where there was a presentation about the Blue Shanty at the last meeting, and Ken Bradshaw gave that. I was curious to know, because it noted that there was going to be some monitoring updates, and there was going to be they were going to send out for finalizing the water quality monitoring plan. and it was supposed to happen at the end of January. I was wondering if we could get an update on that. It was supposed to go to FDP. I'm not clear who would actually update us on that, but I'm curious if it has been finalized and submitted to FDP.
Hey, good morning, Donato. This is Dan Crawford with the Corps. Yes, we have submitted an updated monitoring plan to FDEP in February. I'd be glad to work with Ken Bradshaw to get you a copy of that information. And we are working to determine the timeline for starting the water quality data collection. I think the meeting minutes reflect late summer for that new monitoring station or monitoring location within Conservation Area 3B in the flowway. Latest is expectation to try to get that gauge online in September, October timeframe. That's our current expectation. Over.
Awesome. Greatly appreciated. Thanks, Dan.
Okay, thank you, Dan. Anything else on the meeting notes that we need to adjust or correct?
They look good to me,
Okay.
Julianne. This is Lori with the Refuge.
Hi, Lori.
Hi, Julie. This is Ed Smith with DEP. No comments here.
Okay, great. If I have a motion to approve and a second or something, that'd be great. I guess that's what that was. I didn't quite catch your first two words, Lori. Sorry about that.
Well, now I'll just make it, I move to approve the minutes. How about that?
And
That's
Julie,
great. I'm going to take Ed's comment as a second. So if we have any objections from Donato or Dan, are we good with the meeting notes, you guys? Thank you.
Dan's okay with the meeting notes, yes.
All righty.
I'm good
Thanks a
with
lot,
that.
you guys. Okay, let's launch into, let's see, we've switched a couple of items. So John, we're going to turn it over to you for the final water year 20 compliance results on Shark River Slough.
Very good, thanks. So today I have 3 presentations, and I have to make sure I bring up the right one first. Okay, hopefully you're seeing full screen settlement agreement report, water year 2020 annual Shark River Slough compliance.
Yes.
Yep, thank you.
Great. Okay, and yeah, I chose to do them in this order. Julie had mentioned numerous documents on the website, and 2 of those are quarterly reports. The quarterly report that summarizes the 12 months through September is what ends up being our annual report for Shark River Slough and also Taylor Slough Coastal Basin. So I'm going to cover that first, since that period ended in September 2020, and then I'll move on and present the 4th quarter 2020, which goes through December and just adds 3 months. I think it'll be more logical to present it that way. So like I said, this is highlighting the final results. We did present provisional results at our last quarterly meeting for this same period. The summary table has been updated for the center portion here that shows Everglades National Park Shark River Slough, because we used the final flow data from the USGS for those S12 structures. There was a slight difference. The numbers came down a little bit. So the water year ending September 2020, which is water year 20, ended up, the long-term limit was revised from 9.4 to 9.5, just based on that final flow data. And the flow-weighted mean concentration for that 12-month period remained 9.3 parts per billion. And I'll go a little more detail here as we progress through. So for Shark River Slough, it was a relatively low flow year, under 700,000 acre feet. But we did meet our, the limit. So the flow mean concentration below the limit means we met our compliance for that year. And the sampling events that were greater than 10 part per billion, we had 35%, which is lower than the guideline. So those are all good things. So we can look at kind of a brief history here of all the annual results. Can everyone, or Julie or someone, can you see water year 2012 or 14, or is that just an aberration on my screen?
One on mine too.
I don't.
All right, well,
I can. Yeah, I see the slide 4.
Right. Well, I don't know why the graphics came out for 2012, 2014, not sure.
Yeah. Huh.
Unfortunately. But overall, it shows the addition of water year 2020 here. And we'll get, if this is showing up this way on the website, we'll get it updated there. But
Yeah,
so
it's fine on the website, John. I don't know why it isn't showing on the screen here. You guys can either look at the webpage or just imagine virtual blue bars, okay?
yeah, I think those were very close ones, but those were both years that we exceeded the limit, slight amount. But overall, the last 5-year period, we have averaged 8.3 parts per billion for what we've observed, and those average annual limits. The red line represents the limit that we compute each year. So here's the 9.5, 9.3. The average of these last 5 limits is 8.7. So the 5-year average is, we're averaging below that, and our goal overall for in the consent decree is around 8 parts per billion for Shark River Slough inflows. So we're very close to that. Moving on to some detail of the structure flows. We can see the last 36 months presented here for all the inflow structures, and including the 356 pump station that was added. You can see that come in about August 2018, and pumping mostly during the wet season here. When we have the highest flows, we can see a lot of flow from S12, A, B, C, and D. And then when we have lower flow conditions, S333 is a little more dominant in those flows. We're operating under the combined operating plan now, also known as COP. Which might slightly affect the way these look in the future. So again, just breaking out each structure to be perfectly clear on what's discharging. Just got to pay attention to the vertical axes here. S12D has a generally higher flow during this period, so we had to bump it up to 2,400 CFS daily flow in that time period. And then I had explained this chart previously that combines S356 pump station, the 335, which is the upstream structure that kind of defines for us what, under method 1.5, what portion of the 356 flow is coming from the WCAs, and that's represented in yellow. So it's basically the combination of when we have flow at both of those structures, that the lesser of the two represents the flow from the WCAs into Shark River Slough. No flow for a long period from 355A structure, which is a gravity from WCA 3B into the canal. And we had some temporary pump activity back in 2018 related to emergency high water. This is looking at all the flows in and out of the L29 canal segment between S333 and the 356 pump station. And this just kind of clarifies that we do have flows at this 334 structure that flow through, and those were more prominent during some of the this wettest period when we had to get rid of water instead of putting it into Shark River Slough, and then the dry periods for our water supply operations. So finally, we get to some compliance related sampling with those sampling events, the phosphorus levels shown with the circles, and the historic method 1 is shown in yellow, and we've transitioned to a method 1.5. So those yellow circles show through March 2020, and then we started May 2019 showing these cyan or blue circles. There's a couple small differences, mainly they're following each other. So for this, and these vertical bars represent the flow associated with those two methods. Biggest difference being the 356 pump station coming into play. We can see this is a 3-year period within the water year that we updated. You can see we had some high phosphorus values associated with very little flow, and it kind of quickly came back down and allowed us to meet the phosphorus limit for water year 20. This is just the phosphorus data alone. The sampling events shown again in the circles, and the diamonds represent the method 1 in white, and then the method 2 12-month rolling averages or totals. So it's the 12-month accumulation of those, and this is where our final result was for the water year. At an observed level of 9.3. That's what that last dot represents. And that's the update of the information that's in the report for water year 2020. Do we have any questions?
I'm not seeing any hands raised, so I'm assuming we don't have any questions from our panelists. All right, thank you, John.
Yep, I'm going to move on to like I explained, the most recent quarter. All right, and we actually included some extra info in here for discussion as well, or for information. So now we're adding 3 months to what I reported before, and we're going to look at some new information data for the Refuge and Taylor Slough coastal basins, in addition to the Shark River Slough. The October through December values you see at the top are what we're reporting out for the monthly values in the Loxahatchee National Wildlife Refuge, the 14 station network of interior marsh sites there. And in the center, we have provisional data and results for Everglades National Park in Shark River Slough. And this is for tracking purposes. You know, we have our water year results end in September, as I had just presented. And we have the same annual schedule for Taylor Slough coastal basins. So these are tracking and showing our progress right now as we step through the months. We can see that the Refuge, all the monthly values that we're reporting out on October, November, December, the observed geometric mean remain below the long-term level. And our stages were high enough that the long-term level stayed at the minimum value of 7.2, and we were able to collect at all 14 stations. So I'm going to go into more detail on all these. So the first chart here has all these dots. The blue and the red dots represent the geometric means, the monthly geometric means that are observed. And then this other monthly data, these lines represent how we determine the long-term level and compliance. So we have the blue represent stages in the Refuge. And when those stages are high, the long-term level is low. And long-term levels represented by this red line. We have the one month in September 2020 that we had an excursion, and we know that 2 excursions within a 12-month period result in an exceedance. But since that point, our concentrations observed have been far below that long-term level. Our 36-month for this entire period, the average TP geometric mean of 6.8 is 3 parts per billion below the average long-term level. And that's below the long-term level that's expected of 7 parts per billion by the consent decree in this area. So this shows all those same points relative to the long-term level at a 0 line. So we had, again, 1 above, and the rest are, in total, these average 3 parts per billion below that long-term level. We have a little forward projection here for the more recent months of January, February, March, and April of 2021. Geo means remained low, went down to 4.6, 4.7, and back into the 6 to 7 range. And as water levels drop, the long-term level increases a bit. At our stage in April 1627, we were able to collect at 11 of the 14 sites, because a few of them had dried down to a too shallow a level. And that's what I have for the Refuge in this quarterly report. I'm going to move on to Shark River Slough. We can see the flow values for the 12-month periods. These are all 12-month periods ending October, November, December. We had a lot of flow at the beginning of this water year. So since the previous presentation, when it was less than 700,000 acre feet, adding these few months gets us up to almost 15,000 acre feet, or 1,500,000 acre feet. And so our long-term limit that's derived from that 12-month flow has been down at 7.6. The minimum, it won't go lower than that per Appendix A. And flow mean concentrations have also dropped. So it caught up in the January through December period and is just 1/10 of a part per billion below the limit. Flow amine concentration of 7.5, 1/10 of a part per million lower than the long-term limit of 7.6. And our percent sampling events greater than 10 part per billion of 31.8 lower than the guideline. I just presented this slide on the previous presentation, so
And I just wanted to let everybody know this specific presentation is also correct on the webpage. So if anybody's looking for that. Thanks, John.
Okay. I guess at some point I should probably associated with this information, I should clarify that there were two differences in what we presented previously on the data side. One, we've begun on this provisional tracking to incorporate any flow that came through the S33N structure, S333 North structure. And we had previous quarter, I had presented on a potential equation to use for that. And that's what we've used on a provisional basis here for tracking. We've just treated it essentially as a companion structure to 333. And that 333N structure did have some flows starting in November. The other small thing to note is that we are using USGS data. We're going to work out the details with the Corps regarding how we're going to report in the future, what our standard will be. And it's just I guess a nuance from what historically we've in the tracking used the Army Corps' operational data, and since the USGS data seems to be more available in this time frame, we may transition to that. But again, that's kind of a behind the scenes calculation that we will work out those details with Dan and others at the Corps and come back and finalize an approach forward at a subsequent meeting prior to the end of the water year. So we added in a slide here that indicates some information that really doesn't enter into compliance directly, and that's the stage. We have the period of water year 2020 that I had talked about, the 12 months ending September 2020, and added more recent data, in fact, all the way through much of April into April 25th is where at least the flow data is and the stage data is shown through. So we can see the pattern that occurred last year with all the sampling events that I showed. And here you can see the two stages, one being the conservation area average stage, which is a average of 3 gauges, including some from the north, central, and southern. So that's a little more stable because it is that average. And then we have a red trace here that shows the stage for the headwater of the 333 structure. So very close to that structure within the canal. We can see how that gets drawn down when those in the dry season, those flows are being directed through the 333 and now the 333 North structure. We see that pattern that we've seen before of some correlation between the low stages and the high concentrations. And this is just to bring people up to speed on what's happened so far this year. You know, here's a lot of the flow that we've seen. This is the Shark River Slough total inflows in the blue filled area in the background, but we've had concentrations that were very low associated with that. So far this water year, we've had a lot of low concentrations with a lot of flow, and these stages were up high. And as we've transitioned we see the concentrations creeping up, and the stages coming down. And again, all the water year 2021 data shown is provisional at this point in time. Structured daily flows, we've kind of shifted forward here to the most recent 36 months. So the flows that we see in this quarter we're reporting on, November, December, are the highest for this period. And even 356 on top there, a lot of flow from S12D, and the S12 structures in general were able to pass a lot of water during this period. And again, our scale changed here to show all these. We have them all at the 3000 CFS. So S12D is the highest flow, and it kind of progresses to S12C, B, and A. Here's our 333 North flows that we started in November into December, and that was associated with that high water in the stages and danger of the structure being overtopped. So there was a need to pull down the canal levels a little bit in that area. That was the use during that period. And we see not as much towards the beginning of that period. There was water transferred through 356, but then there was so much water coming from other sources that the 335 water was being passed from the conservation areas, but down through South Dade, not into Shark River Slough. And again, the breach of the L29 between the 333 structures and 334, only towards the end of the period in December did we see water being moved through 334 around the corner of South Dade. Otherwise, all this water coming in from 356 and from 333 was actually going into Shark River Slough during this period. Moving ahead, including those months, you can see on this where the circles represent the concentrations again of the flow weighted mean for each sampling event tapering off, and we saw the stages increasing, the flows increasing, and these method 1.5 results show the phosphorus levels declining slowly and steadily during this period of the beginning of water year 2021. So we see that reflected in the overall flow weighted mean for the 12-month periods ending October, November, and December. We can see that those concentrations declining. So now we're ready to move on to Taylor Slough coastal basins. A little bit different. We do show the flow amounts here. They don't directly correlate to the calculation of a limit. The long-term limit is fixed at 11 parts per billion for this area. We've seen 5.4 and 5.8 is what we've sampled here for flow weighted mean concentrations for these 12-month periods ending October, November, and December. And the 2 and 4% sampling events represent essentially one sampling event in this period was above 10 part per billion, and 2 sampling events were above 10 part per billion for the subsequent period. And I can point out when that occurred. Again, the history long term is that these observed levels have been far below 11 parts per billion. The 5-year average at 5.6 remains below the stated goal of the consent decree of 6 parts per billion. So we're showing here flows at 737, S18C, and 332D. See some relatively sharp spikes of flow at S18C, whereas the 332D is definitely more consistent as a pump station, and the S18C is gravity fed and sends water out very quickly when it needs to. Let's see. So for the fourth quarter, which is just the last 3 months here, about half the water went through 332D, and which is 49%, 48% went through S18C, and then about 3% made it through the 737 route downstream of S200. Those same flows are reflected here. We also have the S328, which will show up on the subsequent slide, which is a portion of the 332D. So the water enters into this C111 detention area through the 332D pump station, and it can either exit into, can flow downstream over Weir, or seep out, which is mainly all this blue area. The other piece we monitor is at 328, S328 structure. When that's open, we are there monitoring phosphorus and seeing what phosphorus levels and associating that with those green flows. And then the magenta or fuchsia flows go into the north detention area and not directly in a Taylor Slough. Here we see more dots because we're including weekly sampling in this area for the calculation at this point in time. But we have, again, a change from method 1 to method 3. So we're seeing the historic method 1 throughout, and then method 3 where we incorporated 737 and those features, 328 and 332DX. 1 downstream, and pretty consistent. In the last period of reporting, we had seen and discussed this September 2018 single sample of 14.8. That was during Hurricane Irma. Now we have one other point that was above our 10 part per billion. That's May 26th of 2020. Which was kind of known as the Memorial Day weekend rain that we got at the beginning of the wet season. And that result was 12.4 part per billion. We can again see those concentrations of each weekly event here, and the effect of slightly bumping up the 12-month phosphorus levels from this one event. Right, we have, and yeah, I think I mentioned the overall 5-year average was 5.6 on those. So any questions on the fourth quarter report for the Refuge, Shark River Slough, or Taylor Slough coastal basins?
Hey, John, this is Donato. I don't have a question per se, but can we go back to slide 8? I do want to make a comment.
Absolutely. Thought this one might bring up some discussion.
But no, this is a great slide. It represents a lot of dynamics that are happening. So as a part of the combined operation plans, adaptive management strategies, we have initiated our effort to implement adaptive management with respect to water quality improvements going through the 333 structure. And, you know, there are a few recommendations that we established for that purpose. The first one that would have been triggered, which was not triggered this year, would have been we had water levels in the marsh, the 3-stage average, that were below 10 feet. And as you can see here on this figure, at the end of December, we did not have that condition met, so we did not start our meeting. But we did start approaching the 9.2 feet at the headwater of S333, and once we got to that level, Jim Riley of the Corps, who's been point on this topic for the adaptive management for the water quality perspective, he did initiate phone calls, and we have been communicating back and forth on that. And it got a little more intense once we got around 8.5 feet at the headwater 333. But right now, our recommendation has been to continue to move water through the S333 structure, and hopefully we'll be reducing any sediment buildup in front of that structure. As long as we can keep it from closing and at least have some trickles of water going through there, we should not be seeing a buildup of sediment. So those are some of the recommendations that came up out of the COP adaptive management strategy, and they seem to be functioning pretty well right now. What I'm seeing in this chart is that if you could actually lay over these last 2 years on top of each other, you would notice that the concentrations that we're following right now are slightly below those of last year. And as John pointed out, last year we did good with meeting compliance. So if we can continue to follow this pattern, I think we're on trajectory to see good compliance again this year. Over.
Thank you, Donato. Anybody else have comments or questions?
Julie, this is Dan Crawford, and I just wanted to echo what Donato just said. John, I really appreciate the multidimensional space that you're showing on this graphic. So I just wanted to say thank you. It's very helpful.
Okay. Anybody else? Any of our panelists have comments or questions on this presentation? Okay. Thank you, John. That was really great. Appreciate it greatly. Next, we've allowed a few minutes for this. Should be hopefully pretty straightforward. John, we decided it would be appropriate for the TOC to officially approve the addition of the S333 North to the Shark River Slough compliance equation. So, John, I don't know if you have a handout for that. I can't remember.
So we did have a handout last.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Associated with last quarter. I don't believe we reposted that, so you can always go back to last quarter. It's remained unchanged. I just changed essentially our objectives or for this meeting, instead of just introducing the topic to kind of wrap it up, I made some minor revisions to the presentation and reposted just based on comments we received at that time. So without further ado, as I had indicated, the 333N did begin flowing, and we are monitoring phosphorus and flow at that site. So I'd like to, before the end of the water year, and we have to report out, kind of just get a final confirmation of the methodology that we'll be reporting for the calculation of the interim tracking, and then finally the annual compliance to incorporate the 333 structure flows into Shark River Slough. A reminder of the layout and the features. Both the 333 and the 333N are gated spillways from Conservation Area 3 into the headwaters Shark River Slough, Northeast Shark River Slough specifically. And we have a permit dated December 18th, 2020, for the operation of that defines the operation of 333N. It will be used in conjunction with the existing 333 to convey water from 3A to E and P, as I did, consistent with the combined operational plan, COP. There's just another view looking from downstream. This is hovering over the L29 canal and looking back to the northwest, and the L67A canal extending to the north, and the L29 going west to the S12D and the other S12 structures out towards the west. I didn't have any updated photos, but this was obviously during construction. Here's the proximity of the structures, relatively close, and the platform we're using for monitoring, again, water flowing primarily from the L67 and the conservation area 3 past this sampling platform and into the 333N intake. So a lot of technical equations on here for the record. Essentially, we are, for the calculation of the annual limit, we're adding the flow for 333N, bottom line. Then for calculation of the flow weighted mean, the only complication to that is that we proportionally reduce all those inflows to the L29 East Canal by the amount that goes out the 334. So we have this term that's the fraction of the L29 East to Shark River Slough. So all those flows that go into the L29 minus what goes out through the 334 divided by all the inflows. So if, for example, 90% of the flow, if there's 100 coming in and 10 going out, that means this is going to be 90%. So 90% of the inflows to this area are going to Shark River Slough, and 10% is going down to South Dade. So we just proportionalize all those inflows: 333, 333N, 355A, 355B, and our new term for the 356 inflows, all by 90%, so that they are treated in proportion to what fraction is actually going to Shark River Slough, and 100% of the S12A, B, C, and D all are accounted for in that equation. So final slide, as I had indicated, November 2020, we started seeing flows. We did report per this methodology for the tracking this quarter. And just like I presented the water year 2020 final Shark River Slough reporting today, we will do that for water year 2021 about a year from now. So we'll need this finalized prior to then. So I'd like to field any questions about this particular methodology and see if there are any alternate methods anyone wants to consider, or if we're ready to go ahead and for someone to propose a vote and to approve this. Over.
Thank you, John. Does anybody have comments or questions or alternates, or if not, anybody want to move to approve?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we sure can, Ed.
This is Jed Redwine. I have a couple comments. My understanding, well, I've been watching 333 North very carefully over the last year. My understanding is 333 North was operated with testing flows on and off throughout the summer, well before November 2020. I think my sense is there may be a modest underestimate of the total volume of flow associated with the 333 North, because I believe it was operated prior to November 2020. I think we just need to do some careful inspection of what operations look like this summer and QAQC of the DD hydro process to validate that. But that's before I would suggest accepting this. I think we should scrutinize that component.
Okay, thank you. You bring up something that would be a bit of a conundrum for me because we all just saw the final results through the end of water year 20, which ended in late September. And what you're saying is that you feel there were flows through the structure prior to that even.
Yeah, just on a testing basis, because they were switching back and forth from 333 and 333 North this summer, testing the new structures. It was getting, as you know, it was under construction for much of that time. But then when it was open, there were some initial tests conducted when it was used.
Okay. We can always look into that, Jed. What about this equation here? Does anybody have any comments or questions on getting this slight revision to the equation approved?
Julie, this is Dan. I have no questions for John. I really appreciate his efforts over the last couple of quarterly meetings to share the equation and give us time to review everything. So I would make a motion to adopt the revised equation. Over.
Thank you.
Julie, this is Ed Smith. I will second the motion. Thanks, Dan. I think you said it exactly right. John has done a great job of presenting this to the TOC.
Okay, thank you. Is there any further discussion? I've got a motion and a second to approve adding the 333N, just so we don't have to do it later, you guys.
Julie, does it matter if we take any public comment prior to or after the vote?
We could take public comment before the vote. I'm fine with that. Do we have any of you dialed in as attendees that would like to comment on this addition to the equation? Trying to look for raised hands. I don't see any yet.
I didn't necessarily expect any input, but I know we say that.
No, yeah, no, thank you for reminding me. We do have one raised hand. Joe, I'm not going to try to pronounce your last name incorrectly. I see your hand is up. If you'd like to unmute yourself and make your comment, that would be great. Thank you.
The equation is quite logical on the dilution. So I say, from my perspective, go ahead. Approve.
All right. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you.
Any other attendees wish to make any public comment on adding this to the compliance equation? Okay. I am not seeing any. Okay, so we have a move, we have a second, we have a yay comment. Anybody opposed to adding this? We'll go ahead and vote here. Okay, I'm not hearing anyone opposed, so let's, yay, verily, the TOC approved adding the 333 North, and Jed, we'll look into the comment you made earlier. All right, thanks, folks.
Yeah, Julie, this is Dan. Just I'm going back on my records because Jed prompted the conversation. And I do acknowledge that I think there were about 3 days in September 21st to 23rd where the Water Management District was doing some construction of the 333 North gates. And there were some flows that went in during those 3 dates, but that was prior to any of the SCADA system having been installed. So there would be no way to quantify the precise amount of flow during those 3 days. And other than that, I believe the first time the gates were open was November 15th to pass flows, which is consistent with John's slide. So in my view, it's not likely to make a difference on the compliance equation because I don't think we have any metered flows to be able to use for those 3 days when there was some inadvertent testing by the contractor in the water management district. Over.
All right. Thank you, Dan. I appreciate you looking on your end because I wasn't sure if we had stayed up and running at that point either. Okay, great. I think we are good with almost all of the agenda here. And that would lead us to the addition of the S333 working group to report out. And I think we have a couple of the reps have been on the working group. I didn't hear from Stuart earlier if he wanted to brief, so maybe if one of you would like to volunteer to brief us on what's going on or what has happened so far with the S333 working group. Don't all speak at once. Oh, here's Stuart. I see Stuart's unmuted. Maybe he or Donato, one of you could please update us.
Yeah, I'm here, Julie. I would defer to Donato if he wants to start, or I can start.
No, I think I laid it out earlier. You know, we hit a couple of high points with the sub team. You know, we've come up with our recommendations. We've delivered those recommendations to our principals, and now they've provided some feedback on how they want us to proceed. So, Stuart, I don't want to steal the thunder, so you can take the lead there.
Okay, I'll pick up from there. So the current status is that on February 12th, an initial set of recommendations came out of the working group, and it was presented to the principal leadership of each agency, the district, the Corps, DEP, Fish and Wildlife, and the park. And on March 24th, during the quarterly meeting, it's called the quarterly agency leadership meeting, where the leadership of each agency come together to review issues and efforts associated with Everglades restoration. This set of recommendations was presented to the principals. At that meeting, the principals decided to carve up the work, sort of divide responsibilities, and the district was going to take the lead on a set of recommendations associated with hydrodynamic studies, and the Everglades National Park was going to take the lead on studies related to sediment transport. So since then, both within the park and on the district side, there's been efforts to find and assign resources and start forming the ideas for what the scopes of work would look like. I believe that is nearing completion with forming the teams and getting the initial ideas for scopes of work put together, probably looking in about 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks at the most, to bring the working group back together with all the team resources that have been assigned to work on these and have a kickoff meeting. The goal is to have the statement of work for each set of studies complement each other so that they're congruent and consistent, and develop that over the course of the summer so that we could target implementation of the efforts in the fall. So that's the update at this point. Over.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else who's participating want to add anything at this point, you guys? Sounds like we're getting something done and working toward hopefully answering some questions, because we still have questions. So, all right, so that would be the end of our items on our agenda for today's meeting. I would like to open the meeting to comments from our attendees, from the public. Anybody else who'd like to make any comments before we close today? If you could please raise your hand. Oh, I see a hand raised. Let me see if I can figure out whose hand it is. Let's start with Yogesh, please. If you could speak and let us know who you are, where you're from.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we sure can hear you. Thank you.
Okay. This is Yogesh Khare from the Everglades Foundation. I thank a lot to the group for presenting today's information. It was very informative. I just have one comment, and that is about the S333 working group. I was just wondering if it is possible to have public involvement in the working group meetings and get regular updates from that meeting like today. That will be very much appreciated. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your comment. Joe, you're up next. And could you also please state your full name so I can not mispronounce it?
Joe Giulio.
Giulio, okay, great. Thanks a lot, Joe.
And you're welcome. My question or comment is this. How much of the discharge in the equations that were shown is from Lake Okeechobee and how much is from precipitation? I realize that may not be answerable with the information provided, but I was just wondering how much, because rainfall is basically 0.02 part per billion total phosphorus. Lake Okeechobee is running today around 150. I was just wondering how much proportion is coming from each in terms of the measured very, very low total phosphorus that was shown with the data.
That's a good question, and we will hold that hopefully for maybe a future discussion of some kind. That's going to be a little difficult, I think, to calculate. We're still looking at Lake Okeechobee discharges to the STA, so your single question has a lot of sub-questions that aren't spoken. So anyway, thank you.
I'm aware of that. And very, very much aware of that.
Thank you so much for the question. Anybody else from the public have comments or questions? Stuart Van Horn, you have your hand raised.
Hi, Julie. Just for general public, a great source of information to answer questions about what flows into the Everglades protection area is outlined in the South Florida Environmental Report. Okay. Chapter 3 of the report has a number of mass balance diagrams which are very informative of how water and what sources are coming into the water conservation areas. Over.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, that's really good feedback for folks. There's a lot of really good information in the South Florida Environmental Report, and it's all posted online. Any other comments or questions from the public or our panelists today?
Hey, Julie, this is Donato. I didn't get who Joe was representing. Did you guys get that?
Did not. Joe, did you want to tell us who you're with?
Joe Giulio is with Joe Giulio as just a private citizen.
Okay, great. Thanks a lot.
Thanks.
All right. Anybody else? Oh, gosh. It looks like we just had somebody join us at the last minute, too, but I'm not sure who that was. All right. If we don't have any other comments from panelists or the public, and I'm not seeing any, we will move on to our closing business. which we don't have a lot of right now in terms of action items out of today's meeting, except that folks do want to hear about the working group. So we'll do our best to do that. For the reps, we do want to remind you that we'll be trying to line up our future agenda items. I think there's a few things we've discussed today that you guys may wish to make as agenda items going up in the future. We have a couple of proposed quarterly meeting dates on the bottom of the agenda today. So the next possible proposed dates for a quarterly meeting are July 27th or August 10th, if the reps have any preferences. And I can't promise you if that will be Zoom or auditorium or both, but in any case, how are you guys looking for July 27th or August 10th?
Julie, this is Lori with the Refuge. I am open on both dates.
Great, me too.
Hey, Julie, this is Ed Smith with DEP. I think seeing as Jordan TDO is the rep and will likely be coming back sometime in July, if we could push it to August, I'm sure that would work better for her, but we can make July 27th work.
Okay, great. Thanks, Ed. What about Dan Donato?
What's the August date again?
August 10th.
Yeah, I'm open on the 27th of July and the 10th of August, and I'm willing to accommodate Jordan to TBD.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, this is Dan. I'm good with either date as well, and I'm also amenable to accommodating Jordan's schedule. Over.
Okay, great. We're doing her schedule without her here. Mr. Barquette, how about you?
Yeah, I'm comfortable with either date.
All right, why don't we go with August 10th, everyone? I think that would be the easiest for everybody to kind of get things together. All right, if we don't have anything else today, I think we're finished. Really, really appreciate everyone participating today. For those of you who don't know, we have about 17 or so members of the public as attendees who also call to listen in. So we really appreciate that. And I hope everybody has a great day. This ends our Technical Oversight Committee meeting.
I forgot to say it earlier, John. Thanks for those presentations. Good job.